The distant stars blurred together as Ethan's ship, the Solace, rocketed through the deep stretch of space. He'd heard tales of alien encounters, but they were rare, whispered as legends back on Earth. Yet today, the rumors had turned to reality. Alarms blared through the cabin, lights flashed, and the ship shuddered violently as an unseen force pulled it toward an unknown vessel. Ethan's heart raced, his grip tightening on the control panel as he fought against the powerful magnetic pull. With a final groan, his ship gave in, docking within the alien craft. Moments later, his controls locked, and the hatch doors slid open with a hiss. As he struggled to make sense of his surroundings, he found himself staring at 5 imposing figures silhouetted against the ship's dim interior lights. Their forms were humanoid, but with features that revealed their otherworldly origins, skin tones ranging from deep emerald to a shimmering silvery hue, eyes that seemed to see far beyond human comprehension, and each dressed in elaborate, intricately adorned armor that hinted at their warrior status. One stepped forward, her gaze sharp and her presence commanding. "Welcome, human," she spoke, her voice steady yet carrying a strange, melodic cadence. "I am Zeria, leader of the Huntresses. You've entered our domain, and by our law, you are now bound to the right of survival." Ethan's mind raced. "Survival? What is this, some kind of trial?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The smallest hint of a smile played at the edge of Zeria's mouth. "Precisely," she replied, looking him over as if assessing his worth. "In our culture, all who intrude are subject to trials that test their resilience, wit, and courage. You will face each of us, one by one, until you prove your worthiness or fail." 2 of the Huntresses moved forward, their eyes glinting with intrigue. One, with skin that shimmered in hues of violet and silvery white hair, chuckled softly. "Human, you might find these tests challenging. My name is Naira, and I will be testing your willpower," she said, her words carrying a hint of amusement. Ethan clenched his fists, feeling the pulse of adrenaline mixing with a spark of defiance. The thrill of the unknown filled him, pushing his fears into the background. "I didn't come here willingly," he stated, glancing at each huntress, "but I'm not one to back down." Another huntress stepped forward, her figure slender and graceful, with golden skin that seemed to shimmer under the dim light. She had a calm aura, yet her eyes conveyed intense focus. "Good," she said simply, her voice soothing yet steely. "I am Kayla. We shall see how well you handle the unknown." Her hand reached out, and without another word, she touched his arm, a warmth spreading from her fingers that filled him with a strange sense of calm, though he felt certain it was only temporary. Zeria gestured to the others. "Each of us will challenge you, human, in our own way. Survive our trials, and you may earn freedom. Fail, and you belong to us." Ethan took a deep breath, centering himself. He had trained in survival and combat, prepared for nearly every situation. Yet this was something entirely new. How could he anticipate the trials ahead when he didn't even know the rules? "Then let's begin," he said, the steadiness of his own voice surprising him. The first huntress, Naira, stepped closer, her violet eyes gleaming. She placed a slender silver band around his wrist. "This will track your heart rate and focus," she explained. "It's a test of endurance and mental strength. Human, keep calm, no matter what." The chamber around them dimmed, casting them into semi-darkness. Only Naira's gaze remained visible, those violet eyes locking onto him with a piercing intensity. She leaned in, her voice now a soft whisper. "If you can hold your ground without wavering, you might just survive." The silence grew thicker, punctuated only by the faint hum of the ship's engines. Naira's voice filled the space around him, a mesmerizing sound that seemed to pull at his mind, urging him to relax, to give in to the subtle rhythm of her words. His heart pounded, each beat seeming to echo in his ears. Ethan clenched his fists, fighting to stay aware. This was no ordinary test. Naira was trying to break his focus, her melodic voice and piercing gaze an unseen force pressing against his mind. Every fiber of his being wanted to succumb to the calm she offered, but he refused. As the moments stretched on, Naira's gaze softened, a hint of respect glimmering in her eyes. She tilted her head, almost as if surprised by his resistance. "Impressive, human," she murmured, stepping back. "Perhaps you do have some strength after all." He exhaled sharply, feeling his control return. This was just the beginning, he realized. Naira's test had barely scratched the surface of what lay ahead. She took her place beside the others, her expression unreadable, yet he sensed a change in her demeanor, a subtle acknowledgement of his resilience. The next huntress, Kayla, stepped forward, her gaze calm yet fierce. "Your mental strength is admirable," she said, her voice soft. "But now we test your agility. Follow me." Before he could react, Kayla turned and moved swiftly through a door on the far side of the chamber. Ethan rushed to keep up, stepping into a labyrinthine corridor dimly lit by flickering blue lights. The air was thick with humidity, and the walls were lined with sprawling alien flora that seemed to pulse with life. Kayla's movements were swift and graceful, her figure a blur in the narrow corridor. She led him through twists and turns, each step a test of his reflexes as the walls shifted unexpectedly, revealing sharp barriers and moving floors. Ethan's instincts kicked in, his muscles reacting as he dodged and weaved, his breaths coming quick and shallow. But Kayla was relentless. She darted through the maze with ease, her golden skin glowing in the dim light as she glanced back at him, a quiet challenge in her gaze. "Keep up, human," she called over her shoulder, her voice teasing yet firm. Ethan gritted his teeth, pushing himself harder. His muscles strained, his mind focused solely on keeping pace. He was exhausted but determined, each movement precise as he followed Kayla's lead, his mind calculating every obstacle. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Kayla stopped at the end of the corridor, turning to face him. She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Well done," she said simply, a note of respect in her voice. "Perhaps you are more than we expected." Ethan, breathless yet resolute, met her gaze. His body was fatigued, but his mind was sharper than ever. He had passed the first two tests, but he knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The Huntresses exchanged glances, and for the first time, he sensed something other than intimidation in their eyes. He saw intrigue, and perhaps even a hint of admiration. As he steadied himself, preparing for the next challenge, a flicker of confidence sparked within him. This was a battle of will, endurance, and cunning, and if he had any say in it, he would emerge victorious. Ethan steadied his breath, a growing resolve stirring within him. Each challenge left him more attuned to his own strength and resilience, sharpening his focus for whatever was to come. He glanced at the remaining huntresses, wondering what new trial awaited. The third huntress, who had remained silent up until now, stepped forward. Her skin was a radiant shade of crimson, her dark hair braided intricately and resting across her shoulder. She wore a cloak that seemed to shimmer with threads of molten gold, giving her an almost regal presence. She gave him a long, assessing look, her eyes glinting with an intensity that made him feel exposed, as though she could see through his every defense. "I am Reyna," she said in a voice like distant thunder, "and I will test your courage." Ethan swallowed, meeting her fierce gaze. "I'm ready," he replied, his tone unwavering. Reyna's lips curved into a small, approving smile. She gestured for him to follow as she led him into a dimly lit chamber. At the center of the room was a large circular pit, with flames flickering faintly at its edges, casting strange shadows across the walls. Reyna halted at the edge of the pit, her gaze still fixed on him. "This is no ordinary fire, human. It is fueled by the essence of fear and doubt. Enter it, and your mind will be forced to confront what you fear most. Only by enduring the visions it brings forth will you pass." Ethan felt a shiver of apprehension. He had faced life-threatening dangers before, but this was different. This wasn't just a test of physical strength or agility. He would have to face the deepest corners of his mind. Taking a steadying breath, Ethan stepped toward the edge of the pit and looked down. The flames flickered and danced, as if they were alive, waiting to consume him. He took one last look at Reyna, whose calm expression gave away no hints or encouragement. "Let the fire reveal your truth, human," she said softly. With one final breath, he stepped into the flames. Instantly, heat surrounded him, and a strange sensation coursed through his body. Not quite pain, but a disorienting rush that left him feeling as though his mind were unraveling. The room around him faded away, replaced by darkness. Out of the darkness, visions began to emerge. He was back on Earth, standing in the midst of a war-torn cityscape, buildings crumbling around him as sirens wailed in the distance. He recognized this place. It was the ruins of his hometown, where he had once fought to survive during a devastating conflict. The faces of friends he had lost appeared around him, each expression filled with accusation, with hurt. His heart pounded as the memories of guilt and loss flooded back. He staggered, trying to shake off the vision, but it clung to him, the faces becoming clearer, the memories sharper. Voices filled his head, taunting him, reminding him of his failures, his regrets. "Why did you leave us?" A voice whispered in his ear, and he turned, seeing his best friend from long ago. Her eyes, once kind, were now filled with anger. "You abandoned us, Ethan." "No," he muttered, closing his eyes tightly. "I tried. I did everything I could." The flames intensified, searing him with every unspoken fear, every repressed regret. Images of all he had left behind flashed before him, twisting his heart in a grip of guilt. But beneath the torment, a spark of resilience stirred, fueled by the challenges he had already faced. He had overcome adversity, fought against impossible odds. He wasn't defined by his past or his failures. Clenching his fists, Ethan steadied his mind, focusing on the present, on the reality that lay beyond the flames. "I am not defined by what I left behind," he whispered to himself. "I am stronger than my regrets." The images began to waver, the faces receding as his mind fought back. The flames flickered, as if uncertain, and he felt the weight of his fears beginning to lift. In that moment, he understood. The fire couldn't consume him if he accepted his past and faced his future without fear. As the last vision faded, the flames began to dim, and he found himself back in the chamber, standing before Reyna. His body was drenched in sweat, his breathing heavy, but his heart felt light, unburdened. Reyna watched him in silence, a look of approval in her gaze. "You have faced your fears, and you emerged unbroken," she said. "Few have such courage. You have earned my respect, human." Ethan nodded, too drained to respond. He had survived her trial, but he knew his journey was far from over. His eyes drifted to the final two Huntresses, who observed him with expressions of quiet calculation. They had witnessed his struggles, his triumphs, and now they would be his next challenge. Reyna stepped back, and the fourth Huntress, a tall figure with skin the color of polished obsidian and eyes that glimmered like distant stars, stepped forward. She inclined her head slightly, her gaze intense and appraising. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice a low, melodic hum. "Your strength, endurance, and courage are evident. Now we will see if you possess the most vital quality of all, adaptability." Ethan met her gaze, a flicker of exhaustion tugging at his mind, but tempered by the resolve he had built through each trial. He had come too far to falter now. "Lead the way," he replied, his voice steady, even as he braced himself for what was to come. Lyra turned without another word, leading Ethan through a narrow corridor lit by an eerie blue glow. His body ached, each step reminding him of the physical and mental toll the trials had taken. Yet he pressed on, determined to see this challenge through. As they entered a large, dome-shaped chamber, Ethan took in his surroundings. The room was filled with shifting holograms, illusions of landscapes that morphed and changed in response to some unseen command. One moment, the floor appeared as a dense forest, leaves crunching beneath his feet, and the next, it shifted to a frozen tundra, the air suddenly cold and biting against his skin. Lyra observed his reaction, a faint smile playing at the corner of her lips. "This is the Chamber of Illusions," she said, her voice soft yet commanding. "It is designed to test how well you adapt to rapid changes in your environment. You must traverse this space and reach the other side. But be warned, these illusions are more than visual tricks. They will challenge your senses, your instincts, and your capacity to adapt." Ethan squared his shoulders, eyeing the holographic terrain that lay between him and the far wall. "Understood," he replied. He knew he couldn't rely solely on his eyes or ears. He would need to sharpen his instincts, trust his body's reactions, and be ready for anything. Lyra raised her hand, and the environment shifted once more, casting the room into darkness as the floor turned to sand, slipping beneath his feet. With a single nod, she gestured for him to begin. Ethan took a tentative step forward, the sand sliding beneath him with each movement. He pushed onward, each step deliberate to prevent sinking. But before he could find his rhythm, the environment changed abruptly, the sand vanishing as he found himself balancing on a narrow stone ledge, suspended over what appeared to be a churning river below. His heart pounded as he steadied himself, his arms outstretched to maintain his balance. The ledge was slick, and the roaring sound of the river below disoriented him. He took a deep breath, focusing on each step, grounding himself as he moved slowly across the ledge. Without warning, the scene shifted again, and the air turned frigid. Snow began to fall, each flake stinging his skin as the ground became a slippery sheet of ice. His foot slipped, but he caught himself, dropping to a crouch to keep his balance. The cold seeped into his bones, his fingers numbed as he struggled to maintain his grip. Lyra's voice echoed through the chamber, calm and unyielding. "Adapt, human. Embrace the change, or it will consume you." Ethan gritted his teeth, letting her words ground him. He couldn't control the shifting environment, but he could control his response to it. He adjusted his stance, moving carefully across the icy surface, each step calculated. As he steadied himself, he could feel his body adjusting, his movements becoming fluid despite the constant shifts in terrain. The ground shifted once more, turning into a dense jungle. Thick vines dangled from above, their coarse texture brushing against his skin as he maneuvered through the underbrush. The air was humid, his breaths shallow as he dodged low-hanging branches and thorn-covered plants. Each movement required him to stay alert, his senses attuned to the shifting environment. In a flash, the scene changed again, casting him into a desert landscape with blazing heat radiating from every surface. The dry air seared his throat, and he struggled to keep his breathing steady, his body now drenched in sweat. He pushed forward, ignoring the discomfort as he focused on his goal, the far wall, which seemed just within reach. The illusions began to shift more rapidly, each new environment more disorienting than the last. The ground tilted unexpectedly, the room spinning as he staggered forward, his vision blurring as he fought to stay upright. He closed his eyes briefly, relying on his instincts, feeling the pull of the room's gravity to guide him forward. He took a step, then another, his focus unwavering despite the chaos around him. Finally, with one last push, he stumbled forward, reaching out and finding himself at the far wall. He opened his eyes, the illusions fading as the room returned to its original form. He turned to face Lyra, his chest heaving, exhaustion etched into every muscle. Lyra regarded him with a look of quiet admiration. "You have shown adaptability beyond expectation, human. You do not merely survive. You evolve with each challenge. This is the mark of a true warrior." Ethan managed a faint smile, feeling a surge of pride despite his exhaustion. He had come this far, proving himself against nearly insurmountable odds. Only one huntress remained. The final figure stepped forward, her aura calm and enigmatic. Her skin was a shade of deep indigo, her hair cascading down her shoulders like a river of midnight. Her gaze held a quiet wisdom, a depth that seemed to peer into the very essence of his being. She inclined her head slightly, her voice a soft murmur. "I am Lyra, keeper of the mind and spirit. Your final test, human, is one of inner strength and clarity." Ethan took a steadying breath, meeting her gaze. He had passed through fire, faced his fears, and endured the shifting landscapes of his own adaptability. Now he would have to face himself. Lyra's gaze softened, and with a gentle nod, she extended her hand. "Let us begin." Ethan followed Lyra as she led him down a narrow hallway, the walls lined with symbols and engravings that pulsed faintly in shades of violet and blue. Unlike the other trials, there was no evident tension in the air, no challenge waiting to spring from the shadows. Yet the silence felt heavier here, thick with anticipation and mystery. They entered a circular chamber, dimly lit and resonant with an almost musical hum. Lyra stopped in the center of the room and turned to face him, her gaze soft yet piercing, as though she could see through every layer of his mind and spirit. "This trial," she began, her voice a soothing, almost hypnotic cadence, "is unlike the others. Here you will confront what lies within, the fears and memories you bury deep. Strength of body and sharpness of mind have carried you this far, but now your spirit must prove resilient." Ethan nodded, feeling an uncharacteristic sense of vulnerability. He had faced physical challenges, endured intense mental tests, yet this felt different, more personal. His fists unclenched, his shoulders softened. He knew he would need to let his guard down for this trial, even if it meant exposing parts of himself he usually kept hidden. Lyra raised her hands, and the room began to transform, the walls dissolving into mist. Slowly, familiar scenes began to materialize around him, scenes from his past. He saw his childhood home, his father standing in the doorway, calling out for him to come inside. He could hear his mother's laughter echoing faintly, the smell of her cooking drifting through the air. But as he stepped forward, the comforting memory twisted, the home darkening, the laughter fading. His father's figure turned, and in his eyes was a gaze Ethan recognized too well, a look of disapproval, of disappointment. A flash of old memories surged, memories of arguments, of the pressure he'd felt to prove himself, to be strong, disciplined, invulnerable. Ethan clenched his fists, his pulse quickening. He wanted to turn away, to pull himself out of this vision, but Lyra's voice anchored him. "You must confront it, Ethan," she whispered. "Accept the memories that haunt you, or they will bind you forever." With a deep breath, Ethan allowed himself to face the vision fully. His father's gaze softened as Ethan met it, the judgment melting into something else, perhaps regret or even understanding. Ethan felt the tension within him ease, the unresolved anger dissipating like mist. This was a burden he had carried for years, yet here, in this strange chamber, he felt its weight lift. The scene shifted once more, and he was standing on the bridge of his first ship, the Illumina, watching helplessly as flames engulfed it. He remembered the horror he'd felt, the guilt that he failed his crew, the crushing weight of responsibility that had haunted him every day since. His own voice, barely more than a whisper, filled the air. "I should have saved them." A flicker of movement in the corner of his eye caught his attention, and he saw Lyra standing beside him, her gaze full of compassion. "You could not change what was beyond your control," she said gently. "But you have honored their memory, and in doing so, you have carried their legacy forward. Release the blame, for it no longer serves you." Ethan closed his eyes, a sense of release flooding over him. He knew she was right. He could feel it in his core. He had been holding on to his past failures, letting them fuel his determination, but also weigh him down. Now he let the guilt dissolve, replaced by a quiet resolve to honor the memory of his crew in a different way. As the vision faded, the misty walls of the chamber returned. Lyra stood before him, her expression serene yet proud. "You have passed the trial of the spirit, Ethan," she said. "Few possess the courage to face their own shadows. You are stronger for it, not because of what you've overcome in this chamber, but because of the burdens you've released." Ethan took a steadying breath, feeling lighter, more whole than he had in years. The Huntresses gathered around him, their gazes filled with a mix of respect and approval. Zarya stepped forward, her eyes fierce and proud. "You have proven yourself worthy of freedom, Ethan. You have faced each of us, surpassed every trial, and shown a strength that transcends mere survival." Ethan straightened, meeting each Huntress's gaze. He no longer felt like an outsider in their world. They had challenged him, tested him, and through it all, he had earned their respect. Naira offered a slight nod, her violet eyes gleaming with newfound admiration. "You surprised us, human. I look forward to seeing how your journey continues." Kayla and Lyra exchanged a glance, and Kayla extended her hand in a gesture of camaraderie. "May your path be guided by the courage you have shown here today." As Zarya raised her hand, a panel opened, revealing a path that led back to his ship. She spoke with authority but a hint of warmth. "Go, Ethan. You are free to leave our domain, but know that you are forever marked by the right of survival. Wherever you journey next, remember what you have learned here." Ethan nodded, a sense of gratitude swelling within him. "Thank you for the trials and for helping me find a strength I didn't know I had." With a final nod to the Huntresses, he turned and made his way back to the Solace. As he boarded his ship, he felt the weight of his experiences settle within him, not as a burden, but as a source of strength. As the Solace lifted off, he looked back at the alien vessel, a newfound resolve etched into his heart. He didn't know where his journey would lead, but he knew he was no longer the same man who had entered the Huntress's domain. He was ready for whatever lay ahead. As the Solace drifted away from the Huntress's ship, Ethan felt a strange sense of longing mixed with relief. The stars stretched endlessly before him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something within him had changed profoundly. He was no longer bound by old regrets or haunted by the past. He felt lighter, stronger, and more centered than he had in years. Yet there was something else, a quiet but persistent feeling that this encounter was far from over. He set the ship on autopilot and leaned back, staring out into the vastness of space. Memories of each trial flickered through his mind, and he found himself reflecting on the strength, wisdom, and camaraderie of the Huntresses. Despite the intensity of the trials, he'd felt an unspoken bond forming with each of them, as though he'd been accepted into their ranks in some subtle way. A faint light blinked on the console, pulling him from his thoughts. A message had appeared on his screen, written in symbols he hadn't seen before, but somehow he understood them. "Human, if you seek purpose, follow the coordinates." No signature, no source, just a set of coordinates leading to an uncharted sector of space. Ethan's curiosity flared. Normally, he'd have dismissed such a cryptic message as a trap, but he felt an instinctive trust in this one. Perhaps it was the calm certainty he found within himself during the trials, or maybe it was a lingering connection to the Huntresses and their world. Whatever it was, he knew he couldn't ignore it. Taking manual control of the ship, he input the coordinates. With a deep breath, he veered off course, leaving behind the familiar space lanes. The journey was quiet, allowing him to think and reconnect with the parts of himself that had been uncovered during his trials. He replayed Zarya's fierce challenges, Naira's piercing gaze, Kayla's graceful agility, and Lyra's quiet strength, finding something within himself that resonated with each of them. Hours later, his ship emerged from hyperspace into a sector bathed in the light of a binary star. There, nestled between the stars, was a large structure that appeared to be an ancient station, half covered in cosmic dust and ice, floating serenely. It looked deserted, but the faint glow of lights suggested life, or something close to it, within. Ethan docked the Solace, stepping out onto a platform that led to a long, dim corridor. His footsteps echoed as he made his way inside, and soon he found himself in a vast, circular room with towering arches and intricate symbols carved into the walls, reminiscent of the ones he'd seen on the Huntresses ship. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the room, displaying a familiar figure, Zarya. Her image was ghostly yet powerful, as though she were standing right there beside him. "You have returned, human," her voice echoed, calm but commanding. "Our meeting was not mere chance. You were chosen, called by forces that transcend both of our worlds." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Chosen? For what? "To join an ancient alliance," Zarya's image replied. "The universe holds mysteries and threats beyond imagination. Our kind, the Orcs, have long sought allies among the stars, those with the strength and spirit to face the unknown with courage. Your trials proved your worth, but that was only the beginning." The room dimmed, and the walls began to shift, revealing a series of star maps, alien glyphs, and symbols from countless civilizations. "This place is a nexus," Zarya continued, her voice reverent, "a gathering point for those who, like you, have faced trials and emerged stronger. It is here that you can choose to join our alliance, to protect the mysteries of the cosmos, and to uphold the balance of power." Ethan stared at the maps, the symbols, feeling a swell of excitement and trepidation. This was a purpose far beyond anything he had imagined for himself, and yet he felt a pull, a deep resonance with the mission she described. "What would this mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "If I say yes, it means leaving behind your past entirely," Zarya said, her gaze steady. "It means embracing a life of service to something greater than yourself. It also means facing dangers that would challenge everything you know." He looked back at the hologram, determination hardening in his eyes. "I've spent my life running from my past, carrying the weight of it. But now, I know I'm ready for something more." The hologram faded, and the walls returned to their original state. A new doorway opened, leading deeper into the station. Without hesitation, Ethan stepped forward, his heart steady, his mind clear. This was his path now, a journey that would take him far beyond what he had known, into the mysteries of the stars. As he walked through the doorway, the shadows of his past finally fell away, leaving only the light of the future ahead. Ethan walked through the ancient hallways of the station, his footsteps quiet against the metal floor. A sense of purpose filled him, a quiet, resolute power unlike anything he'd felt before. As he moved deeper into the structure, more holograms flickered to life, each one revealing members of different species, their faces strong, proud, and filled with the same sense of resolve. It was clear he was not alone. He was joining a legacy that spanned millennia. At the end of the corridor, he entered a large chamber illuminated by soft, pulsing lights that seemed to mimic the rhythm of a heartbeat. There, standing at the center, was a figure he recognized instantly, Zarya. She was no longer a hologram but fully present, her armor glinting with strange, iridescent patterns. Beside her were Kayla, Naira, and Lyra, each one watching him with a familiar intensity. "So," Zarya said, her voice calm yet carrying the weight of her authority, "you've come this far. Are you prepared to take the oath of the stars?" Ethan met her gaze, unwavering. "I am." The Huntresses stepped forward in unison, forming a circle around him. Zarya lifted her hand, palm facing him, and the others followed, their hands raised in a silent ritual. Energy seemed to crackle in the air, connecting them in a way that transcended words. "Repeat after me," Zarya intoned, her voice echoing through the chamber. "I am a protector of the unknown." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the words. "I am a protector of the unknown. I vow to honor all life and safeguard the mysteries of the cosmos." He took a steady breath, the gravity of the moment filling him. "I vow to honor all life and safeguard the mysteries of the cosmos." Zarya's voice softened but held firm. "And I vow to seek strength in unity, courage in the face of fear, and wisdom in the unknown." As he repeated the final vow, a wave of warmth washed over him, and he felt an unmistakable bond with the Huntresses. They were no longer strangers, but allies, and perhaps in some way, even family. The chamber brightened, and from above, a symbol descended, pulsing with light. It was an ancient artifact, forged from alien metals and inscribed with symbols Ethan didn't recognize. Zaria stepped forward, lifting the artifact and placing it in his hands. It was surprisingly light, yet filled with an intense energy that seemed to vibrate in his grasp. "This is the Starkeeper's crest," Zaria said, "a symbol of your oath and your bond with us. Keep it close, for it will guide you when the path is unclear." Ethan nodded, a fierce sense of loyalty binding him to this moment. He felt as though he was stepping into a new life, one filled with unknown dangers, but also with purpose and belonging. As the oath ceremony concluded, a soft chime echoed through the chamber, signaling an incoming transmission. Kayla's gaze shifted to a console embedded in the wall, and her calm expression turned serious as she activated it. A holographic display appeared, revealing a distress signal from a nearby planet. "It seems your first test as a Starkeeper has already arrived," Kayla said, turning to Ethan with a small smile. "Are you ready?" Ethan's grip tightened on the Starkeeper's crest. He didn't hesitate. "I'm ready." Together, the Huntresses and Ethan made their way back to the docking bay. They boarded a sleek, advanced ship designed for rapid response, a craft unlike anything he'd seen on Earth. Its controls felt intuitive as he took a seat, Naira nodding approvingly beside him. Their destination was a planet called Silhara, an isolated world known for its extreme environments and rare energy sources. According to the distress signal, a research team had gone missing, and rumors of strange, hostile entities in the region had kept rescue teams away. But this was precisely the kind of mission Ethan and the Huntresses had been trained for. As the ship descended toward Silhara, the vast, storm-laden skies and jagged mountain ranges came into view. Lightning crackled across the dark clouds, illuminating the barren, rocky terrain below. The hostile beauty of the planet was undeniable, and Ethan felt a thrill mixed with apprehension. Once they landed, Zaria took charge, instructing each of them to activate their personal shields. The atmosphere was dense and heavy, making it difficult to breathe without assistance. As they moved out into the rocky landscape, Kayla's keen senses led them through narrow, winding paths toward the research outpost. They found it abandoned, but signs of a struggle were everywhere. Overturned equipment, scorch marks, and claw-like impressions along the walls. Whatever took them was strong and fast, Lyra murmured, her hand hovering near her weapon. Ethan felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as a low growl echoed through the air. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike any he'd seen, its body covered in dark, armored scales, eyes glowing with an unnatural intelligence. It moved with a fluid, predatory grace, its gaze fixed on the intruders. "Stay together," Zaria commanded, her voice steady as she drew her weapon. The Huntresses fanned out, forming a defensive circle with Ethan in the center. The creature lunged, and a battle erupted. Ethan's training kicked in, his movements guided by the instincts and lessons he'd gained from his trials. He fought side by side with the Huntresses, each of them moving with deadly precision, anticipating one another's actions. In the midst of the fray, Ethan found himself face to face with the creature. He felt fear, but also a strange calm, the same sense of focus he'd found with Naira. Channeling his energy, he dodged its strike, countering with a blow to its vulnerable flank. The creature stumbled, and together, they drove it back until it finally retreated into the shadows, defeated but not destroyed. The Huntresses regrouped, and Zaria placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, her eyes filled with approval. "Well fought, Starkeeper," she said, her voice warm. Ethan felt a swell of pride. He knew this was only the beginning of his journey, but he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The team rescued the remaining researchers, leading them safely back to the ship. As they departed Silhara, Ethan looked out at the vast expanse of space, feeling the weight of his new role. The Othranis Huntresses had given him a new life, and a mission that transcended anything he'd ever known. He was no longer a lone pilot wandering the stars. He was a starkeeper, bound to protect the mysteries of the universe alongside those who had become his closest allies. In the following months, Ethan and the Huntresses traveled to distant worlds, faced ancient enemies, and uncovered secrets lost to time. Each mission tested him further, but with every challenge, he grew stronger, his bond with the Huntresses deepening. Together, they became legends, their tales spreading across the stars as symbols of courage, resilience, and unity. And as Ethan looked up at the stars each night, he knew he'd found his true purpose, a life lived in service to the cosmos, with friends who would stand by him until the end. And somewhere in the vastness of space, under the watchful eyes of the Huntresses, Ethan had finally found a home among the stars.